All right, Savannah, can you read this for us?
Can you hear me now?
I can. Thanks
Okay,
for
okay.
rejoining.
Yeah. The government has spent heavily to clean groundwater contaminated by toxic chemical spills. Yet not even one spill site has been completely cleaned, and industrial accidents are spilling more toxic chemicals annually than are being cleaned up. More of the government's budget should be redirected to preventing spills. Since prevention is far more effective than cleanup, it makes little sense that the entire annual budget for prevention is less than the amount spent annually on one typical cleanup site.
Awesome. Sky, what did you say was our conclusion?
More of the government's budget should be redirected to preventing spills.
Fabulous. Yeah, this is what this author is trying to claim, right? But I wanted to point something else out here is we do have a subsidiary conclusion. Did anybody catch the subsidiary conclusion? Nadia?
I'm not sure if this is it, but I think prevention is more effective than cleanup, but I'm not sure.
Actually, okay. So one of my favorite little tricks, which I'm not full of, or it's not a trick. It truly is like helpful. Since, and there's two other words that introduce premises. Does anybody remember what they are? Since, and there's two other ones. One of them is for, and the other is because. So I always say, since it's hot outside, we should get ice cream. Since is introducing our premise of it's hot outside, right? If we were in the, the early 1900s, we might say, for it is hot outside, we should get ice cream. We just don't talk like that. But if you think about it logically, if we are going to offer support for something, sometimes we'll say, for example. That's kind of where that's rooted from, where you just take out that example and you just say for. So for it is this should happen. So we're saying since prevention is far more effective than cleanup, this is actually a premise. Like this is something that we have to take as fact. So our subsidiary conclusion is actually what follows it. So technically this is a conclusion, but what makes it a subsidiary conclusion is it supports our main conclusion. Once again, I think that without knowing that, you can get to this answer choice, but I want to point it out on easier stimuluses just so when it gets harder that we can differentiate between the two. So can we all see how it makes little sense for the entire annual budget for prevention, blah, 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 supports what Sky picked as our main conclusion, which was true. More of the government's budget should be redirected to preventing spills. Awesome. All right, so then whenever we read these ones, it says the proposal about how the government's budget should be redirected plays which of the following roles in the argument? So we want to find where this is in our stimulus. So where does it talk about how the government's budget should be redirected? It's our main conclusion, right? So if we can predict that before we go into our answer choices, so let's say that our question did not say that. Let's say our question said, the statement, since prevention is far more effective than cleanup, was what the role the question was asking us. What would we predict is the role of that sentence? I'll go ahead and highlight it. Let's say the question was asking us about this part right here. In your own words, what would you say the role is of that statement in the argument?
Would it be that it's the introduction or it's the premise or introduction for the subsidiary conclusion?
Mm-hmm. So it could say multiple things. It could say simply, it's a premise for the conclusion, because even though it's a premise for the subsidiary conclusion, it's still a premise for our main conclusion too, right? On trickier questions, it'll be like more what Nadia said, and it'll say, it's a premise for a claim that in turn supports the main conclusion or something like that. It'd say something fancy, but if we can kind of put it in our own words, that as we go through the answer choices, we're going to be able to cross off wrong answer choices because, okay, I know it's not doing that. So let's go ahead and read these ones and put your answer in the chat, please.
Do you want us to put the answer private to you or?
Yes, do I not have it set up to be private?
You do.
No, but you can always like select it to go private instead of
Okay.
I think that's helpful because I see the answer choice. And I'm
Yes,
like,
please put it as private. I think when I go back to the main group, I can't change the chat functions here, but I can do it when I go back to the main group. But for now, if you could send it privately, that would be perfect. I feel like when I teach like fourth graders and I have to just turn the chat off all directly, like to them talking to each other.
for all of the questions that we go through throughout this like boot camp, the first option would be after reading the stimulus to find the conclusion.
Yeah, you ask yourself, is it an argument or a set of facts? But 90% of stimuluses are arguments. So, and the reason I say that is if it's not an argument, there's no conclusion, so there's nothing to find. But we haven't covered any of those question types yet. So for now, just really work on finding your conclusion. All right, so let's talk about this. Everybody got it correct, but we can still learn a ton from this question. So it says it represents an unsupported speculation. If this were to be true, like what does it represents an unsupported speculation mean? Adriana, do you know? I mean, it's in your own words. There's no right answer here. We're just working on translating answer choices right now.
It's not supported.
Nice reference. Like an unsupported speculation. So like if it was like if it represents an unsupported speculation. So like if I said so-and-so, like so-and-so says this, but they're wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I go into my conclusion, maybe me saying like the other person's opinion isn't supported. Like that might be what it could be referring to. That might be when that's the right answer. What about B? It both supports another claim in the argument and is supported by others. What sentence would this, if we were asked about a certain sentence, what would this answer choice be correct for?
Subsidiary conclusion?
Yes, excellent. Because let's look at this. So it says it both supports another claim in the argument and is supported by others. Our subsidiary conclusion fits that description, right? Because it supports our main conclusion, but it is supported by this premise. Excellent. Okay, what about D? What does that mean? Tyler, do you know? I gave you the hardest one.
Is that just a principle?
Mm-mm.
No.
Does anybody
Or
know?
the background information?
It is a presupposition. What does anybody know what presupposition means?
No.
Okay.
I run across that all the time. I was like, what?
Yeah, that's why I'm pointing it out. It comes up as an answer choice all the time. Nikki, do you know?
Yeah, so I looked it up. A presumption or an assumption or preconception is
yes,
what,
it's an assumption.
right.
So it is an assumption on which the argument is based. An assumption is something that we assume without having all the facts, right? So like if we were assuming something, it's kind of hard actually for this answer choice to be the correct answer in a role question, because typically an assumption isn't actually in the argument. An assumption is something that's not mentioned, right? Because if you're assuming something, you don't say that. And then E, it presents an objection to another proposal mentioned in the argument. And so this would be the correct answer if I said, if all cows are green, we should buy green cows. But then I said, or maybe not all cows, the best cows are green, we should buy all green cows. However, the purple cows are cheaper, or the green cows are too expensive. I would be presenting an objection to the proposal of buying the green cows, right? Does that make sense? Awesome. I know this feels like going back to like sometimes like fourth grade, but if we spend time on these easier questions and diving into them, I promise it'll make them more difficult.